276. For the new year, I still live, I still think, I must still live, for I must still think. Sum ergo cogito, cogito ergo sum. Today, everyone takes the liberty of expressing his wish and his favorite thought. Well, I also mean to tell what I have wished for myself today, and what thought first crossed my mind this year. A thought which ought to be the basis, the pledge and the sweetening of all my future life. I want more and more to perceive the necessary characters and things as the beautiful. I shall thus be one of those who beautify things. Amor fati. Let that henceforth be my love. I do not want to wage war with the ugly. I do not want to accuse. I do not want even to accuse the accuser. Looking aside, let that be my sole negation. And all in all, to sum up, I wish to be at any time hereafter only a yea-sayer. 277. Personal Providence. There is a certain climax in life at which, notwithstanding all our freedom, and however much we may have denied all directing reason and goodness in the beautiful chaos of existence, we are once more in great danger of intellectual bondage, and have to face our hardest test. For now the thought of a personal providence first presents itself before us with its most persuasive force, and has the best of advocates, apparentness in its favor. Now when it is obvious that all and everything that happens to us always turns out for the best. The life of every day and every hour seems to be anxious for nothing else but always to prove this proposition anew. Let it be what it will, bad or good weather, the loss of a friend, a sickness, a calumny, the non-receipt of a letter, the spraining of one's foot, a glance into a shop window, a counter-argument, the opening of a book, a dream, a deception. It shows itself immediately or very soon afterwards as something not permitted to be absent. It is full of profound significance and utility precisely for us. Is there a more dangerous temptation to rid ourselves of the belief in the gods of Epicurus, those careless, unknown gods, and believe in some anxious and mean divinity who knows personally every little hair on our heads and feels no disgust in rendering the most wretched services? Well, I mean, in spite of all this, we want to leave the gods alone, and the serviceable genii likewise, and wish to content ourselves with the assumption that our own practical and theoretical skillfulness in explaining and suitably arranging events has now reached its highest point. We do not want either to think too highly of this dexterity of our wisdom, when the wonderful harmony which results from playing on our instrument sometimes surprises us too much, a harmony which sounds too well for us to dare to ascribe it to ourselves. In fact, now and then there is one who plays with us. Beloved chance, he leads our hand occasionally, and even the all-wisest Providence could not devise any finer music than that of which our foolish hand is then capable. 278. the thought of death. It gives me a melancholy happiness to live in the midst of this confusion of streets, of necessities, of voices. How much enjoyment, impatient and desire, how much thirsty life and drunkenness of life comes to light here every moment. And yet it will soon be so still for all these shouting, lively, life-loving people. How everyone's shadow, his gloomy traveling companion, stands behind him. It is always as if in the last moment before departure of an emigrant ship. People have more than ever to say to one another. The hour presses, the ocean with its lonely silence waits impatiently behind all the noise. So greedy, so certain of its prey. And all suppose that the past has been nothing, or a small matter, that the near future is everything. Hence this haste, this crying, this self-deafening and overreaching. Everyone wants to be foremost in this future, and yet death and the stillness of death are the only things certain and common to all in this future. How strange that this sole thing that is certain and common to all exercises almost no influence on men, and that they are the furthest from regarding themselves as the brotherhood of death. It makes me happy to see that men do not want to think at all of the idea of death. I would fain do something to make the idea of life even 100 times more worthy of their attention. 279. Stellar Friendship. We were friends and have become strangers to each other, but this is as it ought to be. We do not want either to conceal or obscure the fact, as if we had to be ashamed of it. We are two ships, each of which has its own goal and its own course. We may, to be sure, cross one another in our paths and celebrate a feast together as we did before, and then the gallant ships lay quietly in one harbor and in one sunshine, so that it might have been thought they were already at their goal, and that they had had one goal. But then the almighty strength of our tasks forced us apart once more into different seas and into different zones, and perhaps we shall never see one another again. Or perhaps we may see one another but not know one another again. The different seas and suns have altered us, that we had to become strangers to one another is the law to which we are subject. Just by that we come more sacred to one another. Just by that the thought of our former friendship become holier. There is probably some immense invisible cure, and the stellar orbit in which our courses and goals, so widely different, may be comprehended as small stages of the way. Let us raise ourselves to this thought, but our life is too short and our power of vision is too limited for us to be more than friends in the sense of that sublime possibility. And so we will believe in our stellar friendship, though we should have to be terrestrial enemies to one another. 280. Architecture for thinkers. An insight is needed, and that probably very soon, as to what is specially lacking in our great cities, namely quiet, spacious, and widely extended places for reflection, places with long, lofty colonnades for bad weather, or for 2 sunny days, where no noise of wagons or of shouters would penetrate, and where a more refined propriety would prohibit loud praying even to the priest. Buildings and situations which, as a whole, would express the sublimity of self-communion and seclusion from the world. The time is past when the Church possessed the monopoly of reflection, when the vita contemplativa had always in the first place to be the vita religiosa, and everything that the Church has built expresses this thought. I know not how we could convince ourselves with their structures, even if they should be divested of their ecclesiastical purposes. These structures speak a far too pathetic and too biased speech, as houses of God and places of splendor for supernatural intercourse, for us godless ones to be able to think our thoughts in them. We want to have ourselves translated into stone and plant. We want to go for a walk in ourselves when we wander in these halls and gardens. 281. Knowing how to find the end. Masters of the first rank are recognized by knowing in a perfect manner how to find the end, in the whole as well as in the part. Be it the end of a melody or of a thought, be it the fifth act of a tragedy or of a state affair. The masters of the second degree always become restless towards the end, and seldom dip down into the sea with such proud, quiet equilibrium as, for example, the mountain ridge at Portofino, where the Bay of Genoa sings its melody to an end. 282. The gate. There are mannerisms of the intellect by which even great minds betray that they originate from the populace, or from the semi-populace. It is principally the gait and step of their thoughts which betray them. They cannot walk. It was thus that even Napoleon, to his profound chagrin, could not walk legitimately and in princely fashion on occasions when it was necessary to do so properly, as in the great coronation processions and on similar occasions. Even there he was always just the leader of a column, proud and brusque at the same time, and very self-conscious of it all. It is something laughable to see those writers who make the folding robes of their periods rustle round them. They want to cover their feet. 283. Pioneers. I greet all the signs indicating that a more manly and warlike age is commencing, which will above all bring heroism again into honor. For it has to prepare the way for a yet higher age, and gather the force which the latter will one day require. The age which will carry heroism into knowledge, and wage war for the sake of ideas and their consequences. For that end may brave pioneers are now needed, who, however, cannot originate out of nothing, and just as little out of the sand and slime of present-day civilization and the culture of great cities. Men silent, solitary, and resolute, who know how to be content and persistent in invisible activity. Men who with innate disposition seek in all things that which is to be overcome in them. Men to whom cheerfulness, patience, simplicity, and contempt of the great vanities belong just as much as do magnanimity and victory and indulgence to the trivial vanities of the vanquished. Men with an acute and independent judgment regarding all victors rules, and concerning the part which chance has played in the winning of victory and fame. Men with their own holidays, their own work days, and their own periods of mourning, accustomed to command with perfect assurance, and equally ready, if need be, to obey, proud in the one case as in the other, equally serving their own interests, men more imperiled, more productive, more happy. For believe me, the secret of realizing the largest productivity and the greatest enjoyment of existence is to live in danger. Build your cities on the slope of Vesuvius. Send your ships into unexplored seas. Live in war with your equals and with yourselves. Be robbers and spoilers, ye knowing ones, as long as ye cannot be rulers and possessors. The time will soon pass when you can be satisfied to live like timorous deer concealed in the forests. Knowledge will finally stretch out her hand for that which belongs to her. She means to rule and possess, and you with her. 284. Belief in oneself. In general, few men have belief in themselves, and of those few, some are endowed with it as a useful blindness or partial obscuration of the intellect, what they would perceive if they could see to the bottom of themselves. The others must first acquire the belief for themselves. Everything good, clever, or great that they do is first of all an argument against the skeptic that dwells in them. The question is how to convince or persuade this skeptic, and for that purpose, genius is almost always needed. They are signally dissatisfied with themselves. 285. Excelsior. Thou wilt nevermore pray, nevermore worship, nevermore repose in infinite trust. Thou refusest to stand still and dismiss thy thoughts before an ultimate wisdom, an ultimate virtue, an ultimate power. Thou hast no constant guardian and friend in thy 7 solitudes. Thou livest without the outlook on a mountain that has snow on its head and fire in its heart. There is no longer any requiter for thee, nor any amender with his finishing touch. There is no longer any reason in that which happens, or any love in that which will happen to thee. There is no longer any resting place for thy weary heart, where it has only to find and no longer to seek. Thou art opposed to any kind of ultimate peace. Thou desirest the eternal recurrence of war and peace. Man of renunciation, wilt thou renounce in all these things? Who will give thee the strength to do so? No one has yet had this strength. There is a lake which one day refused to flow away, and threw up a dam at the place where it had hitherto discharged. Since then this lake has always risen higher and higher. Perhaps the very renunciation will also furnish us with the strength with which the renunciation itself can be borne. Perhaps man will ever rise higher and higher from that point onward, when he no longer flows out into a god. 286. A digression. Here are hopes. But what will you see and hear of them if you have not experienced glance and glow and dawn of day in your own souls? I can only suggest, I cannot do more, to move the stones, to make animals men. Would you have me do that? Alas, if you are yet stones and animals, you must seek your Orpheus. 287. Love of blindness. My thoughts, said the wanderer to his shadow, ought to show me where I stand, but they should not betray me whither I go. I love ignorance of the future and do not want to come to grief by impatience and anticipatory tasting of promised things. 288. Lofty moods. It seems to me that most men do not believe in lofty moods unless it be for the moment or at the most for a quarter of an hour, except the few who know by experience a longer duration of high feeling. But to be absolutely a man with a single lofty feeling, the incarnation of a single lofty mood that has hitherto been only a dream and an enchanting possibility. History does not yet give us any trustworthy example of it. Nevertheless, one might also someday produce such men when a multitude of favorable conditions have been created and established, which at present even the happiest chance is unable to throw together. Perhaps that very state which has hitherto entered into our soul is an exception, felt with horror now and then, may be the usual condition of those future souls. A continuous movement between high and low and the feeling of high and low. A constant state of mounting as on steps and at the same time reposing as on clouds. 289. Aboard ship. When one considers how a full philosophical justification of his mode of living and thinking operates upon every individual, namely as a warming, blessing, and fructifying sun, specially shining on him, how it makes him independent of praise and blame, self-sufficient, rich and generous in the bestowal of happiness and kindness, how it unceasingly transforms the evil to the good, brings all the energies to bloom and maturity, and altogether hinders the growth of the greater and lesser weeds of chagrin and discontent, one at last cries out importunately, "Oh, that many such dew suns were created! The evil man also, the unfortunate man, and the exceptional man shall each have his philosophy, his rights, and his sunshine. We must unlearn this arrogant fancy, notwithstanding that humanity has so long learned it and used it exclusively. We have not to set up any confessor, exorcist, or pardoner for them. It is a new justice, however, that is necessary, and a new solution, and new philosophers. The moral earth is also round. The moral earth has its antipodes. The antipodes have their right to exist. There is still another word to discover, and more than one. Aboard ship, ye philosophers!